Late at night, John sat in the dim glow of his apartment, scrolling past photos he once tried to ignore. Sophia was everywhere, on billboards, magazine covers, and every social feed he stumbled into. But tonight, something caught his eye. Sophia had just posted a new set of glamorous pictures, her hand draped around Ryan's shoulders as they toasted champagne under crystal chandeliers. The caption read, "To the future we built together." John felt that old wound open, the memory of Sophia whispering how he'd never be enough, how she wanted more money, more prestige, more status. She'd walked out of his life like he was a stepping stone, not even glancing back when he'd begged her to stay. He rubbed his tired eyes and almost tossed his phone aside, but then the news alert appeared. Ryan was under investigation for massive fraud, accused of siphoning millions from foreign investors and forging critical documents to inflate his firm's value. The headline read, "City Powerhouse, Ryan under criminal probe, investors flee." For a moment, John couldn't believe it. He read every line twice, his pulse racing faster with each word. Ryan's carefully constructed empire was built on lies. Sophia had jumped ship to join a man who might soon be wearing handcuffs on the evening news. John felt the spark deep in his gut. He remembered the late nights working overtime while Sophia ridiculed his dreams. He remembered her cool voice telling him he'd never succeed without someone else's money, how she'd laughed the night she left. All of it came rushing back, but tonight, the grief felt like fuel. His hands moved quickly, saving screenshots of the story, grabbing files and news snippets. He looked at Sophia's smiling face beside Ryan's, imagining how quickly that smile would fade when the truth unraveled. He wouldn't make the mistake of gloating. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing him rant or break down. He'd stay silent, calculating, patient. He'd let the world humiliate her in public, let her watch her dreams collapse the way she'd once crushed his. Outside, the city pulsed with nightlife, but John felt strangely calm. He opened his old notebook, the one Sophia once mocked him for keeping, and wrote down one line. "This time, they won't see me coming." He would wait, gather everything, and strike where it hurt most, not with drama, but with undeniable facts and carefully timed blows. He thought of Deborah, the quiet but perceptive co-worker who'd always had his back, and he knew he wouldn't be doing this alone. Tonight was the first quiet step in a revenge that would be clean, legal, and total. He'd watched Sophia build her new life on someone else's stolen power. Now he would take it apart, piece by piece. And he wouldn't stop until the same cold emptiness she'd left in him swallowed everything she'd called hers. John had always believed in the quiet power of patience, of building something solid while others chased instant triumph. At 29, he was already known as the architect who stayed late, studying every angle of a blueprint until the walls seemed to breathe under his pen. But no amount of discipline had prepared him for the way Sophia had walked out of his life 2 years ago. Back then, John had been scraping by on small contracts, earning enough to pay rent and buy cheap takeout dinners that he'd share with Sophia in their cramped apartment. She used to tease him about his stubbornness, the way he'd obsess over one detail in a design while forgetting his own birthday. He thought her laughter was warmth, a balm that made his struggles worth it. But when Ryan appeared, with his tailored suits, inherited wealth, and casual arrogance, Sophia's eyes changed. She started criticizing John's frayed cuffs, comparing him, openly, to Ryan's polished ease. "He just knows how to handle things," she'd say, twirling her hair around her finger, while scrolling through Ryan's extravagant Instagram feed. The night she left, she didn't cry. She didn't even pack everything, just the dresses and jewelry Ryan had gifted her in secret. Her parting words still echoed in John's mind. "I'm tired of waiting for you to become someone. I want a man who already knows his worth." Now, 2 years later, Sophia was 28, flashing designer bags and diamond bracelets on social media. In every photo, Ryan's hand gripped her waist like a trophy he'd claimed, but John had seen past the filters and fake grins. He recognized the hollow sheen in Sophia's smile, the way her eyes darted toward Ryan's whenever a camera snapped. Ryan, 30, had inherited a small construction empire from his father, polishing its image with flashy PR stunts, forging alliances in the city's murky underbelly of business deals. He was charming in public, known for donating at charity galas and cracking jokes with city officials. But John had heard whispers, contractors who complained of delayed payments, inspectors bribed with luxury trips, deals that smelled like fraud from a mile away. Still, Ryan's wealth seemed untouchable. Until tonight. At work, John never spoke of Sophia. His colleagues barely knew he'd once been engaged, much less that his ex-girlfriend was now living in penthouses and photo spreads with Ryan. Only Deborah, 27, had glimpsed the cracks in his composure. Deborah was cautious and soft-spoken, with warm brown eyes that seemed to see every fracture in a person's armor. She joined the firm a year ago as a junior project manager, quickly earning John's respect for her calm precision and the way she never rushed to fill silence with meaningless words. They shared late nights in the office, Deborah helping John organize reports and triple-check plans before meetings. She'd noticed the way his jaw tightened whenever a luxury car commercial came on the office TV, the way he sometimes left his phone face down on his desk all day. Once, after a particularly tense client call, Deborah gently asked if there was someone outside of work causing him grief. John had only shaken his head, saying, "It's just old mistakes that keep knocking." Deborah didn't pry, she simply brought him coffee and kept working. In those small moments, John found an anchor. Where Sophia once taunted him about his dedication, Deborah respected it. Where Sophia saw an unfinished man to be discarded, Deborah saw the value in someone building piece by piece. John never confessed the truth to Deborah that Sophia had been his first love, that he'd almost proposed the night she left him. He buried the memory beneath long work days, letting blueprints swallow the ache. But the ghost of Sophia hovered, a reminder that even the strongest structures could crack under the wrong weight. He vowed never again to let someone use him as a stepping stone. As the days passed, John and Deborah became a quiet team. She handled schedules and budgets with a deft hand, freeing John to focus on design. They didn't share personal confessions or flirty jokes, but there was an unspoken trust between them, an understanding that both had been disappointed by the world, yet neither was ready to stop building something better. Meanwhile, Sophia basked in the glitter of her new life. She started appearing at Ryan's side in press conferences, playing the supportive partner, while Ryan boasted about new skyscrapers, civic projects, and record-breaking profits. John studied every announcement with the cool detachment of a man collecting puzzle pieces. He knew Ryan's firm inflated numbers, took shortcuts, and pushed through permits by greasing the right palms. It was the same arrogance that had lured Sophia away, the promise of power without consequence. Sophia flaunted her new role as Ryan's partner, bragging online about charity balls, vacations in Italy, and private tastings at elite restaurants. But John noticed the small signs, the way Ryan sometimes angled his body away from her in photos, how Sophia posted more frequently when Ryan traveled abroad. Those cracks were his silent vindication, but John wasn't content with silent victories anymore. When the news broke of Ryan's criminal probe, John felt the tremor beneath their gilded life. He knew, instinctively, this was his chance. John stayed late at the office that night, scanning every article, copying very damning quote. Deborah noticed the gleam in his eye, the tension in his shoulders. She didn't ask questions, she simply handed him another coffee and told him, "Whatever you're planning, I'm here to help." In that moment, John knew exactly who he could trust, and exactly who would soon watch him rise from the ashes of betrayal. John didn't expect the call that morning. It came from Marcus, the senior partner of the firm where John worked, just after sunrise. Marcus rarely called anyone directly, preferring to delegate through assistants, but today his voice was brisk, almost urgent. "John, get in here by 8, we've got something big." By the time John walked into the conference room, the table was already covered with glossy proposal packets. Marcus gestured for him to sit. "You're the lead on this one," he said, pushing a packet across. "It's a new civic project downtown, high visibility, fast turnaround, massive potential. The funding's private-public, mostly handled through an outside sponsor group. They want discretion and professionalism, no leaks, no drama." John's pulse quickened. The city center redevelopment had been rumored for years, but now it was real, and in his hands. He opened the packet, studying the timeline and budget figures, the site photos and projected blueprints. He felt something stir in his chest, the old thrill of shaping raw space into something that could last for generations. "They specifically asked for you," Marcus continued. "Apparently, your name was on a shortlist approved by the funding consortium, means someone's been watching your work." John frowned, but said nothing. He had a quiet reputation in the industry, steady, precise, low profile. Why would powerful investors single him out? He didn't have long to wonder. The meeting ended quickly, and within hours, he was deep in site analysis. Deborah hovered nearby, her eyes bright with curiosity. "This is huge," she whispered, glancing at the thick stacks of paperwork. "If this goes well, Marcus might make you a partner." John nodded, already focused on overlays and soil reports. It was almost noon when the first bombshell dropped. Marcus called him back into the conference room, this time with several new faces seated around the table: lawyers, finance advisors, and a woman John hadn't seen in years, Sophia. She was dressed in a pale cream suit, hair pinned perfectly, lips painted a soft rose that matched the subtle blush on her cheeks. Her eyes caught John's, flicked away just as quickly, a flicker of surprise quickly replaced by confident poise. "Everyone," Marcus said, clearing his throat, "this is Sophia. She'll be the public relations liaison for the external sponsors. She'll coordinate any media communications, community outreach, and help navigate approvals on the city council side." Sophia's smile was bright, practiced. "I look forward to working with you," she said, her tone breezy, dismissive, as if she were greeting an old classmate she barely remembered. John didn't answer. He felt Deborah tense slightly beside him, watching the interaction. Marcus continued. "The funding group includes a number of private investors and corporations. Confidentially, Ryan's firm is a major backer." John swallowed. So that was the connection. Ryan had picked Sophia to act as the bridge between the city and the messy machine of his company's funding. Of course he had. Ryan loved putting beautiful ornaments in place to distract from his shadowy moves. The meeting droned on, legal disclaimers, deliverables, project milestones, but John barely heard it. He kept his face impassive, but inside his mind raced. Ryan was under investigation. He was in the headlines, leaking money, facing lawsuits and angry investors. Why would he be so foolish as to back a public project now, unless he was using it to wash his reputation clean, prove to the world he was still untouchable? Sophia caught his eye again during a break, smirking slightly. "Looks like you've been busy," she murmured, low enough for only John to hear. "I almost didn't recognize you in that suit. So serious now. How's your little apartment?" John didn't take the bait. "I've moved on," he said quietly. "I'm not the one scrambling for damage control." Her smirk faded just a hair, but she tilted her head and said, "Funny, I don't see Ryan worried about anything. You should really learn how to relax. Winning has a way of calming the nerves." She walked away before he could reply. Deborah watched the exchange with narrowed eyes. "Is she going to be a problem?" Deborah asked when Sophia was gone. "Only if we let her," John said. He spent the rest of the day buried in site surveys and preliminary sketches, but Sophia's presence buzzed around him like a mosquito he couldn't swat away. She breezed in and out of meetings, handing out smiles and sweet words, but John could see the cracks beneath the gloss. Her fingers drummed the table when Ryan's name came up. Her jaw clenched when Marcus mentioned community protests slowing approval. At one point, John caught her alone in the hallway, hissing into her phone. "I don't care what the lawyers said, Ryan, just fix it. I'm not standing on a podium defending you if they find another offshore account." She broke off when she noticed John nearby, her expression tightening into a frozen mask. "Eavesdropping?" she snapped. "Just walking by," John said coolly. Sophia lowered her voice, switching to a syrupy tone. "Then keep walking. This project needs your little blueprints, not your opinions." John kept moving. In his mind, the pieces were falling into place. Ryan was bleeding out behind the scenes, his empire rotting at the core. Sophia was scrambling to hold the image together, playing the loyal partner while the foundations cracked beneath her heels. Deborah slipped him a file later that day, whispering, "I pulled some background on the funding group. There are discrepancies in the paperwork, projected versus actual asset declarations, if you want to look closer." John took the file, feeling the fire spark again in his chest. This wasn't just a project anymore, it was a chance to expose Ryan, to pull the rug from under Sophia's carefully curated life, and to do it all without stooping to their level. By midnight, the office was empty. Deborah had gone home, but John stayed. He studied the numbers, highlighted the irregularities, built timelines and cross-referenced corporate documents. And in the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights, he whispered to himself, "You took everything from me, Sophia. Now it's my turn." John sat at his desk long after the sun set, the office nearly silent except for the soft hum of the HVAC system and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors. the bright glow of his screen reflected off the window, casting a faint halo around his tired eyes. He scrolled through page after page of project documents, but his mind kept drifting to Sophia. Every time he forced himself back to the drawings, he'd remember the smirk on her face when she mentioned Ryan, the way her laughter still stabbed at the soft part of him that hadn't yet fully healed. It was infuriating. He wanted to focus on the project, to bury her in a mountain of blueprints and calculations so deep that she'd vanish entirely from his thoughts. But she wouldn't let him. She lingered in the edges of his vision, every rustle of paper or soft click of heels in the hallway sounding like her approach. He slammed his pen onto the table, taking a steadying breath. Anger pulsed beneath his skin, the old hurt mingling with a fresh wave of rage he struggled to keep buried. "Still here?" Deborah's voice broke the tension. John looked up to find her in the doorway, her coat draped over one arm, eyes soft but searching. "Just finishing up some notes," he lied. She stepped closer, peering at the screen. "You've been staring at the same page for half an hour." John rubbed his temples. "I'm fine, Deborah. You should go home." She hesitated, then set her coat on the edge of his desk. "John, I know it's hard. Working with someone you have history with, but don't let her get into your head. This project is bigger than her." He almost laughed. "You don't know what she's capable of." Deborah shook her head. "I know what you're capable of. You're better than this, better than letting her distract you. Don't give her that power." John leaned back, staring up at the ceiling. "She doesn't deserve to win again, Deborah. She took everything I had and walked away without looking back. And now she thinks she can waltz into this project, parade her perfect life, and expect me to smile and nod like none of it happened." Deborah placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Then don't smile, but don't destroy yourself either. You said you moved on, remember? Show her you mean it. Build something so strong and flawless she can't tear it down. That's your revenge." He exhaled, his shoulders slumping. "It's not enough. Part of me wants her to suffer, to see everything she built with Ryan collapse so completely she's left with nothing." Deborah's hand squeezed tighter. "And if you go chasing that, you'll lose yourself. Don't let her turn you into someone like her." Silence fell between them. The hum of the lights, the soft tick of the wall clock, the muffled noise of traffic outside, it all seemed louder in the wake of Deborah's words. John swallowed hard. "I don't want to become her," he whispered. "Then don't," Deborah said firmly. "You're John, the guy who stays late to make sure every detail is perfect, the guy who never cuts corners, never cheats, never takes the easy path. Remember who you are." He nodded slowly, closing his eyes. Deborah picked up her coat again, pausing at the door. "Go home soon. Get some sleep." When she was gone, John leaned forward, resting his forehead on the cool wood of the desk. His mind flashed with memories he'd buried for years. Sophia's laughter in the middle of the night as they shared greasy takeout, her soft voice whispering his name as they planned a future he thought was certain, the sea. Old finality in her eyes the night she left, suitcase rolling across their worn carpet. He hated that part of him still cared, still flinched at the thought of her in someone else's arms. He hated how her betrayal had cut him so deeply that even now, with new chances laid out before him, the scar still ached. He pushed himself upright, glancing at the blueprints. This project was bigger than his pain, bigger than her shallow games. He had a chance to create something permanent, something that would last long after Ryan's corruption came to light and Sophia's superficial world collapsed around her. But some nights, like this one, the pain still seeped in, sour and corrosive, threatening to rot the foundation he was trying so desperately to build. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to breathe. He would endure, he would keep his head down, stay professional, and wait. When the cracks in Ryan's empire spread, when Sophia's glittering smile turned brittle, he would be ready. He wouldn't break, he wouldn't sink to their level, he would win by staying true to the person he'd always been, the person Deborah believed in even when he couldn't believe in himself. In the distance, the city glowed against the night sky, towers of steel and glass casting soft halos into the dark. He let his eyes drift over them, imagining the future skyline, the one he would help build, a testament to patience and quiet, unstoppable resilience. He whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "I'm not done yet." And in that whisper, there was no rage, no heartbreak, only the steady, unyielding promise that he would outlast them all. John stayed late into the night again, the blue glow of his computer reflecting off papers spread across his desk. Deborah had gone home hours earlier, but she'd left him a small folder labeled urgent. Inside were scans of financial documents she'd quietly pulled from Tia's. He projects shared server, files that Sophia had supposedly vetted before passing them along to the city council's oversight committee. John's eyes narrowed as he compared the figures to the internal budget projections he'd assembled over the past few weeks. Something was off. Certain vendor payments looked inflated, padded by unexplained consulting fees. Others were routed through shell companies that didn't appear in any official partner list. At first, John thought it was a bookkeeping error, but the deeper he dug, the clearer the pattern became. Money siphoned from Ryan's main construction firm, laundered through Sophia's PR agency and into accounts that looked suspiciously private. John leaned back in his chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. His stomach turned. He wanted to believe Sophia was just a pawn in Ryan's game, the pretty face he used to distract regulators and community boards. But her signature was on several key authorizations, approving transfers that were supposed to fund outreach campaigns and community housing studies. Those studies never happened. The money had simply vanished. Part of John wanted to believe Sophia had been manipulated, that she didn't realize what she was signing. He remembered how quickly she could charm a room, how effortlessly she'd made him believe every lie about their future together. But he also remembered the cold glint in her eye the day she left him, her voice soft but cruel when she told him he'd never amount to anything. The old hurt flared again, mixed with fresh anger. She'd learned to play the game well. If she was guilty, she deserved to pay the price just like Ryan. And yet, something in him hesitated. He pictured Sophia's face from earlier that day, the faint tremor in her voice when she mentioned keeping the narrative clean for Ryan, the way her hands had curled into fists beneath the conference table. Maybe she hadn't fully understood what Ryan was doing. Maybe she was in over her head, clinging to the life he promised her while ignoring the rot beneath the surface. John knew he had enough evidence to sink them both. He could take the file straight to Marcus, blow the whistle, and let the legal machine chew Ryan's empire and Sophia's reputation into dust. He could finally have his revenge, delivered in the cold, clean way he'd always dreamed, a neat legal case, no screaming fights or messy personal vendettas, just the truth laid bare. But he also knew the fallout would be enormous. Hundreds of city jobs tied to the project could evaporate overnight. Marcus's trust in him might fracture if he went public without warning. Deborah, who'd helped him quietly gather the files, could end up collateral damage in a scandal that might taint everyone connected to the project. And Sophia, part of him wanted to see her pay, but another part, the one he hated, still cared enough to wonder if he could protect her, shield her from the worst of Ryan's corruption. Maybe he could expose Ryan alone, find a way to leave Sophia out of it. If she was just a pawn, maybe she deserved a second chance. His phone buzzed, breaking his thoughts. It was a message from Deborah. "I've left early. Be careful with what you're holding. This could get dangerous." John stared at the screen. Dangerous. That word echoed in his skull. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply. When he opened them again, he clicked open a blank email draft. He hovered over Marcus's contact, his finger trembling. This was the moment. He could send the documents, watch the chain reaction unfold, and step into the fire he'd been building all this time. He could destroy Ryan. He could drag Sophia into the dirt, erase every smug smile she'd ever thrown his way, but he didn't click send. Instead, he sat there in the half-light, staring at the woman he used to love in his mind's eye, remembering the girl who'd once whispered she believed in him. Maybe that had been a lie, maybe it hadn't. But he couldn't pull the trigger on her life, not yet. He needed to be sure. Closing the email draft, he opened his encrypted drive, tucking the files safely away. Then he reached for his phone, dialed Deborah's number, and waited. When she answered, her voice soft and tired, he said only, "I need you to help me dig deeper. I'm not ready to destroy them, yet." Deborah was silent for a long beat, then she answered, "Okay, we'll get the truth, all of it." John leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He knew he'd crossed a line tonight, not into betrayal, but into something far more dangerous, uncertainty. He would find out exactly how dirty Sophia's hands were. Then he would decide if he'd show her mercy, or if he'd watch her burn beside Ryan. John sat in the back of the city council chamber, heart pounding as the crowd shuffled and murmured. The news cameras were already rolling, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. This hearing had been billed as a routine budget update on the downtown redevelopment project, but John knew it was about to become the epicenter of a scandal that would rip Ryan's empire and Sophia's carefully curated life into shreds. Sophia entered first, her cream suit pristine, hair swept up in an elegant twist. She smiled at the press, fielding questions with polished ease. "We're so grateful to the city for its ongoing support," she said, her voice smooth. "We believe this project will transform downtown into something truly extraordinary." Ryan arrived next, jaw tight, eyes flicking around the room. He didn't see John in the shadows. He walked straight to Sophia, whispered something into her ear. She stiffened slightly, but nodded, pasting on a bright smile as the flashbulbs popped. John checked his watch. Deborah slipped into the seat beside him, laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "You ready?" she whispered. John nodded once. He clutched the thumb drive in his pocket, the one holding every document he'd spent weeks compiling. Payments routed through Sophia's PR firm, shell company transfers, fake consulting invoices, and the missing community outreach studies that never existed outside Ryan's forged paperwork. The council president called the meeting to order. A hush fell over the room. Sophia rose first, giving a short speech about the project's benefits, her voice smooth as silk. She spoke of jobs created, housing units planned, green space revitalized. She thanked the city for its support, promising transparency and partnership. John watched her, remembering the woman who'd once told him she wanted a simple life, quiet and safe. Now she was radiant in the spotlight, the perfect corporate partner, selling half-truths with absolute confidence. When Ryan stepped forward, he flashed a practiced grin. "We're on schedule and under budget," he said, holding up a thick packet of reports. "The city has nothing to worry about." That was John's cue. He rose from his seat, ignoring the security guard who moved to intercept him. Deborah slid him a folded note. He flashed it to the guard. It had the council president's signature, a surprise witness request. The guard stepped aside, confused. John marched to the front. The council president looked up, brow furrowed. "Yes, and you are?" John handed over his ID. "John," he said firmly, "lead architect on the redevelopment project. I have information the council needs to see before approving the next funding round." Sophia turned, eyes wide. "John," she began, voice sharp, "this isn't the time." The council president cut her off. "You have 5 minutes," he said to John. John plugged in his thumb drive. Deborah synced her laptop to the screen overhead, and instantly the chamber lights dimmed as the projector flickered on. "Council members," John said, forcing his voice steady, "I have uncovered financial irregularities tied to this project's main sponsor and its public relations firm." He clicked to the first slide, an invoice showing funds paid from Ryan's construction company to Sophia's PR agency, marked for community surveys, that never happened. A low murmur rippled through the chamber. Ryan's face paled. Sophia's lips parted in shock, eyes darting from the screen to Ryan. John continued, showing transaction after transaction, highlighting the same shell companies Deborah had traced, the same pattern of vanishing money. "This isn't a clerical error," John said, voice rising. "It's a deliberate scheme to siphon funds away from public oversight, using front organizations and falsified reports. These payments bear signatures from both Ryan and Sophia, who was listed as primary PR contact on the funding paperwork." Sophia shot to her feet, voice shrill. "That's a lie!" The council president banged his gavel. "Sit down," he said sharply. "Mr. Ryan, Ms. Sophia, you'll have a chance to respond." John advanced to the final slide, a timeline showing the flow of funds, ending with accounts flagged for federal investigation. "I am submitting this data to the city's legal counsel and state auditors," he concluded. "I believe the council should suspend funding immediately until a full investigation is complete." Ryan lunged forward. "You're sabotaging this project," he spat. Sophia turned to Ryan, grabbing his arm. "You told me this was clean," she hissed, loud enough for the front row to hear. Ryan yanked his arm away. "Don't you start," he snarled. "You signed the papers, your name's on every one of them." The cameras caught it all. John stepped back, breathing heavily, as chaos erupted. Council members shouted questions, reporters pushed forward, shoving microphones toward Ryan and Sophia. Deborah touched John's shoulder, whispering, "You did it!" Ryan's voice cracked as he tried to shout over the noise. "We can explain this, it's standard practice." But the council president's voice boomed over the speakers. "Security, please escort Mr. Ryan and Ms. Sophia into chambers. Council is suspending all votes pending legal review." As Ryan and Sophia were ushered out, Sophia twisted in the guard's grip, eyes locking on John. "You did this," she spat, face pale. "You think you've won?" John met her gaze evenly. "No," he said softly. "I just told the truth." Reporters swarmed the hallway as the guards pushed Ryan and Sophia toward a side door. Cameras flashed in their faces, capturing every crack in their perfect facades. Ryan shoved a cameraman aside, cursing. Sophia tried to smile, but her lips trembled, the mask slipping as the questions poured in. "Did you know about the fraud? Will you face charges? Did you steal public funds?" John stayed in the chamber, clutching Deborah's hand so tightly, her knuckles turned white. He didn't feel relief yet, just a grim, hollow emptiness where anger used to burn. Later, when the room had cleared, Marcus approached him, eyes wide. "You realize what you've just done," he said quietly. John nodded. "I did what was right." Marcus sighed. "It's going to be messy, but you did good, John, damn good." He clapped John on the shoulder, then left to field questions from the press. John sagged into his seat, staring at the empty projector screen. Deborah sat beside him, silent, until finally she whispered, "You didn't just protect yourself, John. You protected the whole project, the whole damn city." John looked at her, eyes tired. "I didn't want it to end like this," he murmured. Deborah squeezed his hand. "I know, but you did what had to be done." Outside, he could still hear Sophia's voice rising over the reporters, denying everything, her polished veneer cracking under the weight of the truth. In the distance, sirens wailed, and John wondered if they were coming for Ryan already, or if the real punishment would be the days of public humiliation, the collapse of the empire they'd built on lies. He thought of Sophia's bright smile the first day he met her, the way she used to call him dreamer, like it was a good thing. He thought of the moment she left him, choosing easy money and glitter over the slow, painful path he'd always walked. Now she was standing in the ruins, cameras flashing as the whir LD picked apart her lies. John felt no triumph, no rush of vengeance, only the steady certainty that he had built something stronger than her illusions, the truth. And in the end, that was enough. John watched the headlines roll across the morning newsfeed, each one another nail in the coffin of Ryan's once mighty empire. City powerhouse Ryan indicted on 23 counts of fraud. Sophia blacklisted after PR firm implicated in financial scandal. The bright photos of Sophia in designer suits, smiling beside Ryan at charity galas, were replaced by images of her looking pale and shaken, hiding her face from reporters as she left the courthouse. For weeks, the fallout dominated every news cycle. Ryan was arrested at his penthouse, cameras capturing the moment he was led out in handcuffs. His smirk was gone, replaced by the hollow stare of a man watching his kingdom crumble. Investors fled in droves, city officials scrambled to distance themselves, and every contract Ryan had signed was placed under intense legal review. Sophia, once hailed as the golden face of the downtown project, became a cautionary tale. Former clients terminated their relationships with her PR firm overnight. Social media lit up with hashtags calling her out for complicity in Ryan's schemes. She tried to release statements defending herself, claiming she'd been manipulated, that she didn't know, but the signed documents told a different story. John didn't celebrate. There was no need to dance on the ashes of Ryan and Sophia's fall. He had his own work to do. In the quiet of the office, John and Deborah worked tirelessly, rebuilding the shattered trust between the project team and the city council. They met with community groups, listened to angry citizens demanding accountability, and restructured every proposal from the ground up. Deborah handled the tense meetings with calm precision, smoothing feathers ruffled by the scandal while John pored over the plans again and again, determined to make them watertight. One evening, after 12 straight hours reviewing revised blueprints, Deborah set down her pen and rubbed her eyes. "They're finally starting to believe in us again," she whispered, voice hoarse. John leaned back, exhaustion dragging at his bones. "We earned it," he said, "every last inch of it." She looked at him, studying the faint lines of fatigue around his eyes. "You know, you could take a day off. Marcus would understand." John shook his head. "Not until it's done." Deborah smiled faintly. "I figured you'd say that." The next morning, Marcus called them into his office, shutting the door behind him with a click. He looked older than usual, his hair thinning and his tie slightly crooked, but his eyes were bright, almost proud. "You two saved this project," he said, voice thick with emotion. "There were calls from the mayor's office this morning. They want to keep us on as lead contractor, and they're recommending both of you for special commendations at the Civic Awards this fall." Deborah blinked. "I don't even know what to say." Marcus laughed. "Say you'll get some sleep tonight. Say you'll let me buy you both dinner first chance we get." He turned to John, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "And you, John, you're not just the best architect I've ever worked with. You're the best damn man I know." John swallowed the lump in his throat, nodding once. "Thank you," he managed. After the meeting, Deborah pulled him aside. Her voice soft. "It's okay to let this be a victory, you know. You don't have to keep carrying the past around." John looked out the window at the rising steel skeleton of the project site. "I don't want to forget," he said quietly. "I just don't want to let it own me anymore." Deborah slipped her hand into his, squeezing gently. "Then let it go when you're ready. I'm not going anywhere." Slowly, over the following weeks, the mood in the office shifted, the calls from the press dwindled, the threat of the scandal faded into the background, overshadowed by new headlines. John still sometimes saw Sophia's face on news alerts, usually grainy photos of her scurrying out of court or ducking into taxis, but he felt no satisfaction in her ruin, only a quiet resignation that some people built their houses on sand and never learned to pour a real foundation. On the day Ryan's trial began, John was on site with Deborah, walking the framework of what would soon be the new community center. Dust swirled around them, sunlight streaming through steel beams. Deborah shaded her eyes, looking at the future. "Can you imagine it?" she said, voice warm. "Families laughing here, little kids running around. All because you didn't give up." John felt the tightness in his chest loosen, just a little. "Because we didn't give up," he corrected softly. They spent the rest of the afternoon marking out walkways and checking load-bearing columns, side by side. John felt the old ache for Sophia drift further into the background, replaced by something sturdier, respect for the people who stayed, pride in what he'd built from the wreckage, and an almost quiet hope that maybe he deserved happiness too. Months later, at the project's grand opening, John stood beside Deborah as the mayor cut the ribbon, cameras flashing. Deborah wore a simple blue dress, her hair pinned back, a soft smile on her lips. John glanced at her, remembering the first time he'd noticed her in the office, head bent over budget reports, quiet and steady while the world spun out around them. After the speeches and photos, they slipped away from the crowd, standing on the rooftop garden overlooking the city. The sunset painted the sky gold and crimson, reflecting off the glass towers around them. "I wish Sophia could see this," Deborah murmured. John exhaled slowly. "She will," he said. "She'll hear about it, and maybe she'll finally understand what she walked away from." Deborah leaned against him, shoulder warm against his. "You don't hate her anymore, do you?" John shook his head. "No, I don't think I ever really did. I just wanted to prove I was more than the man she left behind." Deborah smiled. "You've done that, and so much more." He slipped his arm around her, holding her close as the city lights flickered on below. "We built this," he whispered. She nodded, resting her head against his chest. "And no one can take it from us." As night fell, they stood together, watching the future they'd forged with steady hands and stubborn hearts. In the distance, somewhere, John imagined Sophia staring into the dark, remembering the man she once called a dreamer, the one she'd thought would never amount to anything. He hoped in some small way, she'd learned the truth. That sometimes the strongest buildings rise from the quiet grit of people who refuse to fall. John sat alone in his new office, the city skyline stretching out beyond the wide glass windows. The hum of construction had faded hours ago, leaving only the distant rush of traffic and the faint echo of his own heartbeat. The shelves were still half-empty, dotted with blueprints and books, a plant Deborah had given him last week sitting on the corner of his desk. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, letting the exhaustion seep into his bones. Months of endless meetings, tense negotiations, and sleepless nights had led here, to a quiet room on the top floor of the building he'd helped design, in the company he'd rebuilt from the ashes of scandal. He thought of Sophia, somewhere out there, her name now tainted by endless headlines, her polished smile replaced by weary, defensive scowls as she dodged reporters. He wondered if she lay awake at night, thinking of him, thinking of what they'd shared before Ryan, before she'd traded him in for the illusion of an easier life. A part of him wanted to hate her, to savor every article that painted her as complicit, every whispered rumor about her being blacklisted from new projects. But the anger was gone now, leaving only a strange emptiness where his grief had once burned. Deborah knocked softly on the door, poking her head in with a small smile. "You're still here?" He nodded. "Just thinking." She stepped inside, setting a takeout bag on his desk. "You need to eat. Come home soon, okay?" He nodded again, offering a tired smile. "I will." She squeezed his shoulder, then left, the door clicking shut behind her. John sat there a moment longer, the silence settling like dust around him. He glanced at the plant, its leaves soft and green in the dim light, then back at the skyline, the glow of office towers blinking like stars. "Revenge isn't loud," he whispered to himself, voice barely more than breath. "It's the future she can never touch." He let the words sink in, felt their truth curl around his heart. Sophia could chase the spotlight, claw her way back into polite society, beg for second chances in front of cameras. But she would never touch this steady life he'd carved out, the team he'd built, the respect he'd earned not through shortcuts and charm, but through grit and quiet, relentless work. Outside, the wind rattled softly against the windows. John closed his eyes, breathing it in, feeling the last traces of the past slip from his shoulders like an old coat he no longer needed. He opened his laptop, pulling up the latest design drafts. Somewhere out there, the world still turned, projects still needed building, people still needed homes. That was his focus now, the future. In the corner of the screen, a news alert flashed. Ryan's trial delayed another week. Sophia is photographed leaving court, face hidden behind sunglasses. John didn't click on it. He didn't need to read her excuses anymore, didn't need to watch her try to spin another lie into sympathy. He shut the notification, smiling faintly. He had work to do. And this time, no one could take it away.